"Power's out, Patty. Just mine." The words rasped out, fogging in the frigid, rain-laced air, and I could barely manage them because the heavy-duty flashlight was clamped between my teeth like some desperate, soaked scavenger. I stood there, barefoot on her pristine welcome mat, wrapped in a blanket I'd grabbed in blind haste, feeling the absolute, paralyzing certainty of the cold. Patty, president of our illustrious Crestview Commons HOA, just smiled. Not a friendly smile, but that tight, thin-lipped curve of someone who just won a very petty, very personal lottery. She stood framed in the warm, yellow light of her doorway, a steaming mug of cocoa cradled in her hands. Her house, like every other house on the block, glowed defiant against the howling storm. "Every house except mine. Rules are rules, dear," she said, taking a delicate sip, her voice syrupy sweet, laced with the smug satisfaction of minor tyranny. "The HOA flagged your modifications." That's when the cold certainty settled over the initial shock and rising fury. No more warnings, no more trying to reason with the unreasonable. If Patty wanted to play games with the power grid, she was about to get a masterclass from the man who actually built the damn playground. The storm had rolled in like an angry god just after sunset. Not the flashbang, its silver kind, but a slow, grinding assault of wind and water that sent branches skittering and turned streets into shallow rivers. Lights flickered neighborhood-wide, then stabilized as backup systems kicked in, everyone's porch lights glowing reliably. Mine had flickered on too, for about 90 seconds, then silence. Utter, complete, plunging darkness. The smart thermostat went dead first, then my security system emitted a single mournful chirp before fading. The low, comforting hum of the refrigerator ceased, a sound I hadn't consciously noticed until its absence screamed disaster for the $500 worth of specialty groceries I'd just stocked. My first thought, naive in retrospect, was a localized outage. Annoying, but understandable. What I saw when I stumbled outside wasn't a blackout, though. It was a statement. Every other house was ablaze with light. Even poor old Mrs. Gable's oxygen concentrator hummed steadily down the street. Only my house, 255, Whisperwood Lane, stood like a black hole, swallowing the ambient light. Back inside, dripping on the foyer tiles, I tried rebooting the system from my phone app. Error. Cannot connect to home network. I logged into my utility dashboard for Peak Energy Solutions. Access denied. Below the login fields, a new message glowed starkly. Power service suspended due to HOA violation. Contact HOA administrator. Since when did a gaggle of neighborhood busybodies wield the power to sever a home from the electrical grid? A sharp, insistent knock echoed from the front gate. Taped to the metal bars, sealed in a dripping plastic sleeve, was a bright orange violation slip. Unauthorized energy storage/use. HOA code 8B7. Immediate disconnection mandated. And there, at the bottom, was Patty's looping, self-important signature. Laughter, sharp and incredulous, burst from my chest. Generator use. My sophisticated solar array and battery backup system was grid-tied, designed to seamlessly take over only if the main grid failed. It hadn't failed. The grid had been deliberately severed. That's what drove me, shivering and furious, to Patty's doorstep. Her smug confirmation that the HOA did it, citing some obscure, likely misinterpreted bylaw, was the final straw. I didn't argue further. The rage was still there, a burning coal in my chest, but something colder, sharper, took its place. Calculation. I turned mid-sentence, leaving her with her victorious smirk, and walked back through the puddles. Let her savor her moment. The next one belonged to me. I bypassed the main entrance, heading around to a nondescript side door secured by a keypad only I knew the code for. Inside, I navigated by the faint emergency lighting to another door, reinforced steel masked as a simple utility closet. 2 layers of biometric security clicked open. Monitors flickered to life, bathing the room in a cool blue glow. Status dashboards, live grid feeds for multiple sectors, network traffic analyzers, and on the main central screen, beneath the Peak Energy Solutions logo, "Welcome, Administrator." Because here's the part Patty, in her petty kingdom of lawn violations and paint color approvals, could never comprehend. I wasn't just another homeowner subject to her whims. I wasn't just connected to the power grid. I was the CEO of Peak Energy Solutions, the company that supplied electricity to her precious HOA and 47 other communities across 3 counties. The company whose name was on the meters she supposedly oversaw, and whose disconnect notices she had just, illegally, signed. The only reason she'd managed this stunt was a buried loophole, an obscure compliance clause related to HOA administrative overrides on legacy systems, something left over from 2 company acquisitions ago that hadn't been properly firewalled. My oversight, technically, an oversight about to be rectified in a very public way. My fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing standard interfaces and diving straight into the core system logs with top-level credentials. There it was, 3 hours earlier. Patty, using outdated HOA administrative credentials we thought had been deactivated, had called into a low-priority support line handled by a junior technician. She'd cited code 8B7 and greenlit the disconnect without running the standard cross-checks against property pins or system types. A one-in-a-million bureaucratic fluke fueled by Patty's audacity. The temptation was immense. A few keystrokes and my lights would be back on. I could erase the incident log, maybe even trigger a faulty meter reading alert on her own house, just for spite. But as lightning briefly illuminated my darkened command center, I hesitated. This wasn't just about my lights, my spoiled groceries, or even Mrs. Gable's oxygen machine. A quick check showed her sector was stable, thankfully. This was about the abuse of a regulated utility service I was ultimately responsible for. A quick fix wouldn't teach the necessary lesson or fix the vulnerability she'd exploited. This required a more elegant, systemic solution. Instead of restoring my power, I began building a case file. I saved the call recording. I cross-referenced the timestamp with my own security camera footage showing Patty taping the violation slip to my gate. I documented the specific grid protocols she'd bypassed and the potential safety risks her unauthorized action created. Then, I sent a carefully worded, heavily encrypted internal request to my head of compliance. Begin Level 1 Silent Audit Sector 19B HOA Admin Access Logs. Focus Review Disconnect Authorization for 255 Whisperwood Lane. Flag potential unauthorized credential usage. Utmost discretion required. Just as I hit send, a notification pinged on a separate, highly secure internal messaging platform reserved for sensitive communications. An anonymous handle, one sometimes used for internal whistleblowers, flashed on screen. The message was brief, stark. Administrator, Patty's disconnect on your property isn't isolated. It's a symptom. Look deeper into 19B. Financial irregularities, metering anomalies, unauthorized taps. The whole sector needs scrutiny. She thinks she owns the power here. A chill colder than the storm outside ran down my spine. It seemed my decision to escalate things systemically was more necessary than I'd even realized. Patty wasn't just a petty tyrant. She might be something far more problematic. And she had definitely poked the wrong bear. My house would remain dark, a silent personal monument to Patty's overreach and a useful cloak while I moved behind the scenes. The first step was containment and observation. I routed a priority directive to Peak Energy's Grid Operations Center, flag Sector 19B, entire subdivision, effective immediately. Initiate Level 3 Quality Assurance Monitoring under Project Nightingale. Project Nightingale was our internal code for heightened surveillance on potentially compromised grid segments. It meant every electrical irregularity, every voltage spike, every manual override attempt originating from or targeting that zone would be automatically logged, cross-referenced, and flagged for a dedicated compliance team. Patty wouldn't see the digital fences going up, but she and anyone else playing games with our infrastructure would soon feel the scrutiny. I spent the next day coordinating remotely from my command center, washing up using water heated on a camp stove. I made calls, not to neighbors or the HOA, but to key department heads within Peak Energy. Compliance, legal, field operations, billing integrity. Everything official, everything quiet. By Tuesday afternoon, the alerts started trickling in, validating the anonymous tipster's claims. Alert 1407. Anomalous high load signature detected from the HOA clubhouse circuit. Non-compliant, high amperage wiring retrofitted for an outdoor hot tub. No permit, no inspection. Authorized by Patty Weatherly, HOA president. Alert 1522. Sustained. Unusually high power draw flagged from Unit 8. Registered to Marcus Thorne, Patty's cousin. Consumption pattern consistent with large-scale cryptocurrency mining operations. Further analysis suggested an unmetered subterranean cable running directly from the unit toward the HOA office's external power junction, likely bypassing metering altogether. Alert 1650. Multiple smart meters within the sector reporting intermittent communication failures. All service orders signed off under Patty's legacy override credentials. She wasn't just playing queen of the cul-de-sac. She was treating the local power grid like her personal piggy bank, running her own shoddy, unauthorized thief of electrons. Wednesday afternoon, I received the standard invitation to the HOA's monthly board meeting. Normally, I deleted it instantly. This time, I knew just the person. I called Arthur. Feel like crashing an HOA meeting tomorrow night? I asked. Arthur was an old friend, a sharp, semi-retired tech investor with an encyclopedic memory for arcane rules. Let's just say the president might be overstepping her authority regarding certain utility matters. I need eyes and ears inside, and perhaps a well-placed question or two. I briefed him, feeding him printouts of the evidence, and gave him a micro earpiece linked to my command center. Blend in, listen, wait for my cue. And Arthur, have fun. Thursday evening, I sat in my command center. Audio came through Arthur's earpiece as the residents gathered. Patty took the podium, beaming, ready to unveil her latest power play. New rules granting the HOA board advanced control over individual power allowances during peak events. HOA Code 4. We'll cut off whoever we damn well please. As she basked in her perceived authority, Arthur, positioned near the back, raised his hand. I fed him the line. Excuse me, Madam President, Arthur said, his voice polite, slightly hesitant. These new rules you're proposing, will they apply equally to everyone, or perhaps more specifically to residents who might have disagreed with certain board decisions recently? Patty stiffened. The rules, as always, are applied equally and fairly across all units, she said tightly. Arthur nodded slowly. Then he pulled out a simple manila folder I'd prepared for him. That's reassuring, he said, opening it, because I was just looking over some recent electrical usage patterns. For instance, the clubhouse's external hot tub circuit seems to be drawing nearly 8 kilowatts continuously. Also, reviewing the HOA Charter, Article 7, Section 4B, states quite clearly that any control action pertaining to regulated utility services must be handled by licensed and bonded professionals, not board members directly. A wave of murmurs swept the room. Patty's face went from smug pink to pale white. She opened her mouth to interrupt, but Arthur pressed on. And one more thing, he added, almost cheerfully. Purely informational, of course. As of 8 a.m. this morning, Sector 19B, our lovely neighborhood, has been reclassified by the provider, Peak Energy Solutions, as a conditional use community due to irregularities in grid management and infrastructure compliance. This means a revised rate structure is now in effect. You should all receive your updated billing summaries reflecting this change by Monday. The room erupted. Reclassified, someone shouted. What does that mean for our bills? Patty looked like someone had just pulled the plug on her internal cooling fan. You can't do that. Peak Energy can't just change our rates. Arthur countered, calm amidst the chaos. Actually, Madam President, it's not illegal when the utility provider changes a classification based on documented evidence of frequent unauthorized tampering with regulated infrastructure and bypassing of safety protocols. It's called policy enforcement. It's right there in the terms of service most people don't read. Patty, losing control, snapped back defensively. I was protecting the neighborhood, protecting the grid integrity. That was the opening I'd given Arthur. He took it perfectly. Protecting us from what exactly? The only house without power during that storm. The only one specifically cut off by an HOA directive citing a rule that didn't apply. Belongs to the CEO of Peak Energy Solutions. The man whose company provides every watt of electricity to this room, to your homes. He lives here, Patty. You cut his power, and I promise you. Arthur let the words hang in the suddenly silent room. He's not going to let that go quietly. The silence was absolute. Patty's face went from white to a furious, blotchy red. She banged her gavel weakly, declared the meeting adjourned, and practically fled the podium. Her little empire was cracking. The shock wave hit the HOA's finances the following Monday. The revised bill landed in their inbox. $17,243.89 due immediately. It included backdated charges under the new commercial rate structure, penalties for tampered meters, and fees for unauthorized infrastructure usage, all itemized. Patty's furious emails demanding to speak to someone in charge at Peak Energy received polite automated replies, placing her in the standard customer service queue. My next step required a slightly more official touch. I placed a call to Supervisor Evans at the County Utilities Commission. "Evans," I said, keeping my tone casual. "My compliance team flagged some significant irregularities and potential safety hazards in HOA Sector 19B. Meter tampering, unauthorized taps, the works. Seems prudent to schedule an official infrastructure integrity audit for the area. Public safety, you know." Evans, a gruff, no-nonsense veteran, didn't miss a beat. "Consider it scheduled. We'll have a team out there Friday morning." The arrival of 2 county utility vans and a half-dozen inspectors sent ripples through the neighborhood. Patty came running out of her house in a pink bathrobe, shrieking that she hadn't received proper notice. The lead inspector calmly replied that they didn't require HOA permission. They found Marcus's thick, shielded cable running underground. They found the bypassed meter wired into Patty's garage workshop. Patty babbled something about destructive raccoons chewing wires. The inspector just raised an eyebrow and asked dryly, "Do raccoons usually install UL-listed surge protectors, ma'am?" We arranged a little sting operation. We identified a senior field tech known for his integrity, briefed him, and subtly leaked his contact number through a channel Patty monitored, framing him as someone potentially flexible. She took the bait. The recorded conversation was pure gold. Patty, trying to sound conspiratorial, offered him a $200 Visa gift card and a bottle of expensive wine to simply reset the numbers back to residential spec on her meter and Marcus before the county finalized things. We packaged the key audio snippets, transcribed them, and sent the file anonymously to every registered resident email address in Sector 19B. The HOA forums exploded. To drive the point home, I authorized a final, precisely targeted grid calibration exercise for that Friday night. Just Patty's house, Marcus's Cryptoden, and the HOA clubhouse. At precisely 8 p.m., just as Patty, attempting damage control, was starting a live-streamed interview with some obscure local podcast about effective community leadership, her power died. Mid-sentence. Her reaction, an audible gasp followed by an unhinged "What the hell?" was priceless. Every other house on the block remained brilliantly lit. My field tech left a small laminated tag on her main breaker panel, section isolated for system audit, PS. Her final, most pathetic move came 2 days later. She hired some kid named Kyle, a 20-something dropout, to physically hack the local grid infrastructure. The moment Kyle pried open the service conduit panel behind Patty's house, tamper alarms blared silently in my command center. Then the piece de resistance, my drone unit, disguised as a wildlife monitoring camera, detached from its perch, swooped down, its spotlight blinding Kyle as a synthesized voice boomed from its speaker. "Unauthorized access detected. Step away from the conduit. This incident is being recorded." Kyle screamed, dropped his tools, and scrambled away. Patty, watching from her porch with a glass of rose, shrieked like she'd seen a ghost. The footage went viral. Patty was no longer just an HOA nuisance. She was a meme, a laughingstock. The simmering discontent finally boiled over. Judge Miller formally invoked Article 12, Section 3 of the HOA Charter, immediate recall vote for gross misconduct. While the neighborhood buzzed, I executed the final critical maneuver. I accessed the integrated billing and compliance module for Peak Energy, flagging the utility accounts linked to Patty, Marcus, and her 2 closest allies as suspended, pending infrastructure tampering investigation. Crucially, I then linked this status flag directly to the HOA's digital voting eligibility database. Our terms clearly stated that accounts under active investigation were temporarily ineligible for participation in HOA governance votes. A neat legal and technically sound checkmate. Sunday evening, the community hall was packed. As the digital voting portal was activated, the system immediately flagged Patty, Marcus, and her allies. A volunteer read out their names. These members are currently listed as having suspended utility accounts pending investigation and are therefore ineligible to vote in this recall proceeding as per Bylaw 6.2. Patty leaped to her feet. This is outrageous. A setup. You can't disenfranchise us. Judge Miller simply looked at her coolly. The system reflects the records provided by the utility provider based on ongoing investigations into activities you yourself initiated, Patty. The rules are being followed precisely. The vote proceeded without her. It was brutally swift. Recall Patty Weatherly as HOA president. Yes, 92%. No, 8%. A wave of relieved applause filled the hall. Eleanor, the neighbor who co-signed the petition, was nominated as interim president by acclamation. As Eleanor began to speak, promising transparency, Patty grabbed her papers, face contorted with fury. This isn't over. It's a conspiracy, she yelled, storming towards the exit. Just as she reached the door, someone near the back held up a phone playing the audio from the bribery sting. Clear as day. It's not tampering if nobody reports it. A wave of derisive laughter followed her out into the night. The moment Eleanor accepted the presidency, an official email from Peak Energy's legal division arrived in her new inbox. The formal cease and desist letter detailing every violation and the mandatory compliance reforms required within 30 days to avoid permanent commercial reclassification. Minutes later, a certified courier pulled up to Patty's house just as she was trudging up her walkway. The courier handed her a stiff, important-looking envelope bearing the Peak Energy logo and referencing Federal Energy Regulatory Commission (FERC) guidelines, citing potential violations under federal statutes regarding tampering with critical energy infrastructure. A neighbor's phone captured it all, Patty scanning the first paragraph outlining potential felony investigations, her face draining of all color before she collapsed in a heap on her perfectly manicured lawn. Her reign hadn't just ended. It had spectacularly imploded. I finished my coffee. The community, under Eleanor's sensible leadership, began to transform. The power dynamics were finally correct. My final contribution arrived the following week. A large, sleek digital display board installed in the clubhouse lobby. It showed live readouts of energy consumption, solar generation, and community notices. At its base, carefully etched onto a brushed steel plaque, was a quote. Never let someone who doesn't understand the system be in charge of the switch. Below it, a tiny pixel art engraving of our drone hero. That night, for the first time since the storm began months ago, I initiated the sequence to restore full power to 255 Whisperwood Lane. Lights blinked on. The refrigerator hummed back to life. Peace. Not the tense silence of waiting, but the genuine tranquility of order restored. Patty was a footnote, a cautionary tale. The community had found its footing, stronger and more connected than before. So, tell me, have you ever dealt with a petty tyrant who thought they held all the cards, only to discover you knew the system they were abusing better than they did? Drop a comment below and share your story of turning the tables on HOA corruption. And if you believe that the solution to petty tyranny is strategic competence, hit that subscribe button. The power truly belongs to the people who understand the grid.